Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. Coming in for our midday nugget. Pray all is well with everybody. But come on in, listen. So today, our conversation is coming from some time spent on the prayer porch at the lighthouse. So I just really wanted to um, probably make you laugh, make you think a little bit. So today, I'm sitting out on the porch. It's raining here, so could be a little cold. It's a little wet. So I'm sitting on the porch and I'm like, man, I look across. I'm like, oh, I really would like to go sit down like on the patio area, but it's wet, it's cold, it's too far. And so when I say, I was like, I wonder if this is how the man at the Pool of Bethesda felt, right? Like, I want to go over there, but I don't know. I feel like the Lord is saying I should go over there, but I'm not really too sure. So this is where the Lord led me, and I just want to share this all with you all today because I feel like this is prevalent for sometimes where we find ourselves if we're not careful. And so I'm going to take us to the conversation that Jesus had with the man who was lame or who sat at the pool for 38 years. And I just want y'all to just think about this for just a moment. Just go with me, entertain me for a minute. I'm going to be as brief as I possibly can. But I want us to kind of talk about something here. So when we go to the book of John, we know that Jesus is coming around and he's going to the area in Bethesda, which was known as the sheep gate at a pool, right? And so what he's telling the people as he's going around, this is where lame folks, right? It says, I'm going to read it for you. Chapter 5. So if you go John chapter 5, verse number 3 says this, okay? Hey, Pastor Keisha, how are you? Hey, how are you? Verse number 3 says this right here. It says, in these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. And so what it had me kind of perplexed by was like, who are you sitting on the porch with? Right? Like, who are you sitting on the porch with? Are you sitting on the porch with blind folks, lame folks, halted folks, withered folks? Some versions say paralyzed folks. And then I started to ask myself, what's the definition? What do these words mean? Right? And so when I started looking up blind, it starts talking about how maybe you because of injury you have lost your sight, right? So you can't see. Maybe because of disease you've lost your sight so you can't see, or maybe you just haven't been able to see from birth, right? It was been present since your birth. But then as I further read about blind, it says sometimes you can lack perception, awareness, and discernment. Perception, awareness, and discernment, understanding, and judgment. Or sometimes you just can't see clear. Now let's talk about being lame. That means you're unable to walk without difficulty, right? Maybe sometimes you've had an illness or an injury to a leg or a foot, so it just alters the way in which you walk. And so also sometimes you can be, if you're lame, you know how we say people lame because they're not inspiring, or what they say is dull, things like that. You call people lame. Now, if we're talking about halted, like sometimes you can be in a space of suspended movement, right? You're not actually having any momentum, but you're just kind of stagnant, right? So your momentum or your motion or your movement has stopped. And then we start talking about being withered, right? So then it's something that maybe your limbs have shrunken up, you've gotten, or they've kind of gotten so rigid that they no longer move in the way in which they used to. Right. And so then when we talk about being paralyzed, we're basically saying you can't move at all. You just stuck wherever you are. That's just where you're going to be. And so I need us to understand that the people that are in this space where Jesus is, they're either lame, they're blind, they're halted, they're withered, they're paralyzed. Right. And so this is the type of people that gathered in this area, right? That gathered in this area. And so as we continue on in John, I noticed some things as I was reading through. And so one of the things that verse number 4 says, get that off of there, sorry. Verse number 4 says, for an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whoever went in first after troubling of the water stepped in was made whole, and whatever disease he had. So basically what they're saying is whoever stepped in first after the angels troubled the water was made whole of whatever disease that they had. right? So essentially, all these lame people, all these sick people, all these blind people came to these porches, because there were 5 porches in this particular area. It was near the water, and so that they were waiting around, right, sitting on these porches, waiting around. And so most of you may not be aware, but I call the porch at the lighthouse is called the prayer porch, right? And that's where people should be praying as they wait for God to answer, for God to reveal, for their healing to come, and things of that particular nature. But there's an intention for the prayer porch or the gathering in that area. And so in this particular area, they were gathering in anticipation or expectation of being the first one to enter the pool so that they could attain the healing that they desired. Right? So they're poached pretty much, okay, waiting for the angels to trouble the water so that they can get in. And there was a certain man, verse number 5 says, there was a certain man there which had an infirmity for 38 years. So for 38 years, y'all, 38 years, this man had come near these porches, right? Come gathered around the porch for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he said unto him, Wilt thou like to be made whole? He said unto him, Wilt thou like to be made whole? So this is Jesus encountering this man, asked the man, who does he want to be made whole? And what does the man say? Right? What is the man's response? He says, the impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I'm coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus didn't ask him anything about the pool. Jesus didn't ask him anything about if he needed help to the pool. The question was, do you want to be made whole? Right? And this man, because of his limited frame of thinking, because of what he understood about the pool and the angel shaking up the water, his healing and his miracle was right in his face where he was, not even at the pool. But the only response that he could conjure up to say, instead of just saying, yeah, I want to be made whole, he gives a reason why he hasn't been made whole. And Jesus instantly responds to the man, Rise, take up thy bed and walk. Even though the man's response was about what he didn't have and who he didn't have, Jesus still healed him. Did you hear me? Jesus still healed him. And he didn't have to get in the pool. Listen, and he didn't have to get in the pool. What did Jesus tell the man to do? In verse number 8, he says, Jesus said unto him, Rise, take up thy bed and walk. So as this man has come to this place for 38 years, but been in this place for 38 years, because I'm not sure if he was moving, again, it says he was an impotent man, okay? But he's been in this area for 38 years, awaiting someone to put him in the pool, because he himself could not get to the pool. That's what he told Jesus. I can't get there. I'm looking for somebody to get me there. And everyone else steps down before me. Oh, no, it says, but while I'm coming. So when he's going to the pool, another people step down before him, right? As he's trying to get there, somebody else beat him. Jesus told the man, Rise, take up thy bed and walk. And immediately, verse number 9 says, and immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath. Now, what does that mean? The Sabbath, we'll read along and you'll understand what the Sabbath means. But Sabbath is supposed to be the day of rest. And so immediately the man picked up he was made whole when he did the thing that Jesus asked him to do. And so that's a nugget that I want us to take away from today. Even though in that space and in that area, you were supposed to wait till the waters were troubled. You were supposed to be the first one who entered the pool in order for you to be made whole. But this man's encounter with Jesus, right? This man's encounter with Jesus made him whole. What did this man do that made him whole? He surrendered his thought that the only way he would be made whole was if he made it to the pool. And how do we know that he surrendered the thought? Is because when Jesus told him to rise, take up thy bed and walk, the man did exactly just that. He was obedient to what Jesus told him to do. Jesus said, rise, he rose. Jesus said, take up thy bed, he took up his bed. Jesus told him to walk, and he walked. Right? And it says, and immediately the man was made whole and took up his bed, and the same day was on the Sabbath. Right? And so as this man surrendered his old mindset that the only way, hey Tress, the only way that he would be made whole, right? Because that's the way that the people around that area, the only way they were made whole was if they were the first to the water. But his encounter with Jesus was different. Jesus spoke to him and told him what to do. And so he surrendered what he knew that happened previously for other people. Other people were healed by getting in the water. Him rise and taking his bed up and walk, that was something new. So what he did was he obeyed what God told him to do. Pick up thy bed and walk. And that's how his healing manifested. He was surrendered and obedient. Okay? He was surrendered and obedient. And that is how his blessing came about. And so sometimes it says, and he answered them. So then after he walked off, then the Jews therefore said unto him, that was cured, right? That was cured. So now we know he was cured. Okay. It is the Sabbath day. It is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed. Listen. So not only did this man have to surrender the thought that he had to get in the pool, he also had to surrender the thought, right, that he couldn't pick that bed up because it was the Sabbath. Right? It was the Sabbath, and they weren't supposed to be taking up any beds and walking and doing any work, right? And so then asked they him, what man is that which said unto thee, take up thy bed and walk? Because he said, hey, he that made me whole is the one who said to me, take up your bed and walk. Right? He told them, hey, Jesus told me to, he didn't know Jesus, but he said, Jesus told me to take up this bed and walk. Right? And so, and he did. And he that was healed was not who is was. He didn't know who it was. He's like, I don't know who it was. For Jesus had left. Jesus gone in the crowd. He left. He's not even worried about it no more. And after Jesus found the man in the temple. So the man took up his bed and walked and got to the temple, right? So he's in the temple. Jesus comes back to him in verse 14. Now, this is what I want us to understand, because we always talk about the man at the Pool of Bethesda. We always talk about how he was lame for 38 years, how he was unable to have motion and movement for 38 years, right? How he was not healed, how he was not cured for those 38 years. But what we don't always talk about, right, is verse 14. And it says, afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said unto him, behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. Right? And in some other translations, some of the other translations, it says, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. Right? And so we have to be reminded, right? We have to be reminded of certain things. There is a level of surrender and obedience that we must have when we go into encounters with Christ. And one of the reasons why this is what I feel like the Lord brought to my attention as I was having just a moment of prayer on the prayer porch, right? Is because I was going to God seeking answers. I was going to God seeking clarity. I was going to God seeking not to be blind, seeking not to be stagnant, seeking not to be withered, seeking. Do you follow what I'm saying? Right? I was going to God seeking discernment. I was going to God seeking some things, right? So in my area of seeking God, so that I'm making sure that I'm making forward momentum in the ways in which God desires, not the way I want, but God, what do you have for me in this season? How would you like for me to move in this season? What would you like me to put my hands on in this season? And as I sat on that porch, what God reminded me is that I can't have a bold ask and then not be willing to do what is asked of me after I ask. If the man at the Pool of Bethesda would not have been willing to rise, pick up his bed and walk, he would not have seen the healing that he saw. And so my word of encouragement and my nugget for you today is, you've been in your prayer time. You've been seeking the face of the Lord. God has revealed to you some things. God has given you some things to do. And so the question of today is, do you want to be made whole? Do you want to see the manifestations of the miracles and the prayers that you've prayed? Do you want to see those things? And if your answer is yes, and only if your answer is yes, because if you don't, then that's fine. But if your answer is yes, then your obedience is required. You must do the very thing that God told you to do, radically, unapologetically. And what you also need to understand in the promise that you can take with you and put in your hat. And what I got out of my porch moment. What it took for somebody else is not what it's going to take for you. Yes, the rest of the people may need to be the first person in the pool. But because I have taken an opportunity to sit with my Father and ask my Father, what is it that I need to do? I'm just going to be just like, I'm claiming my blessing to be just like the man with the 38 year issue. Jesus is just going to tell me what to do, and the manifestation of my miracle will result in my obedience. So what do I mean when I say that? Oh, some people have a team to do some things. Well, I know that it's going to happen for me whether I have a team or not. Some things that take other people 5 and 6 and 7 and 10 years to happen, that's not going to be my story. Why? Because I'm going to be obedient to what God tells me to do. And my healing is going to be instantaneous. So I'm not going to even have to walk to the water. I'm not going to have to get in when it's swirling. When I hear what the Lord says to me, and I am obedient to what the Lord says to me, I am going to have it right then. And so your noonday nugget or your midday nugget, or what I'm pushing you to stretch outside of your normal mindset to surrender. Because it don't really take all that. What it takes is your obedience, your radical obedience, your obedience to break the laws, your obedience to break the norms. That man picked up that bed on the day of rest, okay, where nobody was supposed to be working, because his healing depended on it. And so there's some things that you're going to have to do that's outside of the box, that's outside of the norm, that people won't understand. And people may even question you on it. But I hang your hat on this. Your obedience is required for the blessing that you've been praying for. So I pray that this has blessed you today. I pray that those of you who have been feeling stagnant, those of you who have been feeling unclear, those of you who have lost your discernment, those of you who just have not been in movement or motion at all, this is the answer to your prayer. You've been asking, and this is God answering. And how do I know that? Because this isn't even a part of the regular 30-day nugget journey. This was definitely inspired by sitting out on a porch and my obedience to just come in and have this conversation with you. How you've seen it happen for someone else is not how it's going to happen for you. And I need you to settle that into yourself. Don't be like the man when Jesus asked him if he wanted to be made whole, and give all these reasons why you haven't been made whole. And don't miss the opportunity to be obedient in the present moment, to get your blessing in the present moment, because you do what God is asking you to do, whether you understand it or not, whether they will question you or not. I pray that this was a blessing to you. Have a blessed day. See you back here tomorrow.